more recently, in the past 3 years, there was a guy who remodeled his bathroom so badly that it became known as Grover bathroom, even though it wasn't Grover.
Mm-hmm.
And then there was, within the past year, Grover truck, which was the same deal. A guy got a box truck and like put a fire pit in it and tried to turn it into like the ultimate pussy wagon, basically.
That's what's up.
There have been some successful goon projects.
The coals roll out of your truck.
Yeah, Dropsy the Clown was a successful goon project. I can go on. I mean, the things that Something Awful is most famous for are its DIY projects. So this is a subject that is going to keep coming up on this podcast, whether we want it to or not.
Hello, everyone. My name is Michelle Perez. As always, I'm joined by my buddies Jake, my buddies Ruben, my buddies Eliza, and this is the Workinonit podcast. A little bit before we get into the meat of the episode, which is sort of us doing a bit of a decalogue and recollection, getting more into the entity of this Groverhaus. Be remiss, since we have a big central goth figure on the pod, to commemorate the life and recent passing of novelist Anne Rice. My mother absolutely devoured Anne Rice novels throughout my adolescence and teens, and my mom absolutely loved it, and also she read the weird Catholic revival era of Anne Rice too, where she became Catholic, but then sort of recanted or at least distanced herself from the Catholic Church when they started voicing a lot of negative sentiments towards LGBTQ people, and also the various child sexual assault cover-ups within the Catholic Church. Anne Rice, absolute real one, absolute icon. Every bit of bastardized and sometimes really terrible parts of fandom. She was like actively fighting against a lot of negative parts of fandom, and was just consume the work, take the work as it is, don't lionize or this or that person. And I wouldn't lionize Anne Rice, but what a real one, I would say. Absolute top tier creator. A lot of the lineage you can draw to really good gay shit now. It's as a result of this very, very, very cool author's body of work and commitment to a really excellent view of malleable identity. I think she in some ways Anne Rice is way better at capturing the gay experience or whatever than some mainstream gay people now. Real shit. Memory serves, complete and utter het. But yeah, R.I.P. Absolutely.
I mean, she was the classic Fujoshi, right? I mean,
absolutely
the straight woman who, if I think it can be said, somewhat fetishizes, but in a way, there's an understanding there also of a homoerotic masculine experience, and
yeah,
some of that I think is the little bit of transgenderism that everybody has, even cis people, and I think some of it, comes from there is some fellowship between straight women and gay men. And I think that it's kind of been minimized in the modern discourse, maybe more than it should be. But, I used to, my old boomer summer of love gay neighbor who survived the AIDS epidemic. I mean, he used to come over and he'd just be like, fucking men, motherfucking men, And that's, he's right. He's right, and he should say it. So I think that, I think we could recognize her for that.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Well, I'm unfortunately in the seat of I haven't consumed all day any Anne Rice content, not even the movie. With
you got to see Interview.
Yeah,
Interview
exactly.
was
With Pitt
insane,
and Tom
dude.
Cruise. I really, again, this is like, it's something that like there's no way I would have been allowed to see it growing up, and then in my adulthood, I just haven't seen it. Like, just haven't crossed paths with Anne Rice stuff.
Right. Yeah.
But I will say, as someone who has always liked nerdy shit, it has always been obvious to me that Anne Rice is like someone who has earned her keep. You know what I mean? Like, I would meet people that were like,
Yes.
"Oh, Anne Rice, like, you don't fuck with that. Like, that's some great books. That's some great fiction. Everyone who loves Anne Rice loves Anne Rice, and like, no one has anything bad to say about her."
Mhm.
And yeah, that was like, again, maybe there are some bad stuff to say about her, but I always kind of heard of her as someone who was like very important in fiction, even if I hadn't read her stuff.
Right. I mean, the number one important thing that she did was to introduce us to the idea of the twink vampire, which,
right.
I think that I'm fairly educated in this specific genre, and I think I can say somewhat confidently that I don't think that the sparkle twink vampire existed before she came up with it, because before then we had the sort of swarthy foreign monster vampire that, Varney the Vampire, Dracula, all of that stuff, and then the sort of classic conceptions of vampires. Not to say that Bela Lugosi wasn't attractive, because he certainly was, but
right,
he was not Brad Pitt, he was not Tom Cruise.
It was like predicated on a fear of an other, and like eroticizing that was like a very early conception of it. You could see that shit with the Wolfman or whatever.
Right. Even the Christopher Lee depictions and all the other early depictions are masculine, like definitively. Like he's a handsome guy, sure, but he's got the lines in his face. He's his rougher skin. He doesn't have smooth, white, glistening skin.
I mean, you can tell where one's derivative versus one's the real one. Like the sort of moralizing that happens in the more modern stuff. Like the Mormon vampires that are all glistening and gay, or sorry, like gay sort of readings or whatever, or at least effeminate through a greater cultural lens from
you're talking about Twilight, right?
Your Twilights, versus
to clarify, the author is Mormon, right? And that's this is correct.
The Twilight author, sorry.
So I mean, Twilight in that sense was written because Mormon sex scenes are like working up to holding somebody's hand, so it really plays into the sort of vampire eroticism, which has nothing to do with actual like sex. So that's the position that Stephanie Meyer, is that her name? That's
Stephanie Meyer, versus Rice, where it's like Lestat was like a slave owner or whatever, like in X amount of time. Like
Louis was the slave owner.
Oh, actually. Sorry, Louis, my bad. But like these are not like straight up people without moral failings or this or that, but they become so much more interesting and rich because it's like sort of a stand-in for not just like a social commentary straight up, but it's just like, well, what's the type of person that never gets told no, or being told no doesn't matter to them for a long enough period of time. And it's like someone that could accumulate for fucking ever. And so it's like absolutely, it's so crazy rereading these things when you're not like in your teens or whatever as an adult. And it's just like it is sort of like that sort of bad boy sort of Fujoshi bit where you're just like the inaccessibility of these people and like fawning over this idealized form you can't have. It's
right. I will say, like, anecdotally, I guess, like, the other thing I could definitely tie to Anne Rice was being, as a teen, being someone who did certainly look at my fair share of like yaoi type stuff and like when someone would describe Anne Rice to me, I would be like, oh, so it's like that.
It's like, it's yaoi for middle-aged women.
Exactly. I would connect the dots in my head. I'd be like, okay, I get it. The vampires are gay. and then just haven't read a book of it.
Mhm.
Hell yeah.
But understanding that that's kind of like the Western version of that same concept. Yeah, it is funny. I saw someone else mention like Anne Rice, the OG Fujoshi, and I was like, I hadn't put that together in my head. I was like, of course.
That was me, I
Absolutely.
think.
Yeah.
I posted that yesterday.
Mm.
Well, I want to go into just like briefly, there's an interesting there's a lot of criticism of heterosexual women and young
Oh, sure.
girls sort of creating this gay eroticism, the gay male eroticism,
Mhm.
and like consuming it as exploitative. And I mean, yeah, I can sort of see that being the case, although I'm not sure exactly who is being harmed. I guess that's kind of a different conversation. But I think that there is something to be said, and this is something actually that comes up in, of all things, the Team Fortress 2 fandom, which is 100% women.
It really is. Eliza is not playing on this shit, and it's not
No.
just when she says women, it's not just like people where the identity is malleable or it dips into trans mask. There's definitely trans mask views or whatever that dip, but like I mean like a not insignificant amount of like cis women.
Yeah, like women. If you ask them, they're like, "Oh yeah, I'm a girl." Like that's not up for debate. So
Absolutely.
that type of person, many of them are my dearest friends. There is a power fantasy where you are a man, even if you don't identify as a man. Part of your sexual fantasizing is like, what if I was not constantly in danger in every sexual situation I was in? And the vampire power fantasy really plays into that for both gay people in general, like queers generally, and also women, because it's like, oh, if I'm a powerful supernatural being and also immortal, that completely removes the risk from sexual encounters, and it introduces like fantasy risks as opposed to risks that I actually have to think about in real life, like rape, pregnancy, abuse, or even just the even more common and more prosaic risk that I'm not going to have any fun during the sexual encounter because men don't know how to have sex. So the vampire thing is really, it's a very satisfying fantastical embodiment of the female sexuality, because it completely removes that aspect of being in an oppressed position to the person that you want to have sex with.
Yeah, absolutely. I don't always think like the author is always looking for like a one-to-one stand-in through their protagonist, but I do feel that there sometimes is like a little bit of desire that gets eked out, and it's like, yeah, no, absolutely. Anne Rice, she definitely wants to be behind the steering wheel of Lestat in these books, and like have that sort of experience doled out to the reader. Like, yeah, to sort of see this guy's experience over time. He's like, equal parts sort of religious figure and rock star at a certain point in time. Yeah. Good Lord. I don't know if we're going to get like a reappraisal a la Showgirls or whatever, but like, I kind of wonder what would happen if people kind of go into Queen of the Damned again and see how they feel about it.
That's what I've heard. I've definitely heard.
Is that based on Anne Rice?
Oh, Queen of the Damned is, yeah.
Queen of the Damned, yeah.
I had no idea.
I know this. I had my legit first crush ever was Aaliyah at all, like a celebrity. And
yeah, so Queen of the Damned is about Lestat.
I had no idea that it was even in the same world.
Jake, you got to catch up your vampire movies, man. This is embarrassing.
This is true. This is true.
So he's basically.
I only recently saw what's his name's Dracula, Francis Ford Coppola's Dracula. So this will be the year of the vampire.
So like a bunch of
end of the year of the vampire.
A bunch of new metal people, like new metal singers, basically at different intervals in different songs, are Lestat's voice. So like David Draymond from Disturbed and Jonathan Davis from Korn are both Lestat's singing voice at some point in the film. It's fucking nuts.
That fucking rules.
Jonathan Davis plays a scalper and also provides the uncredited singing voice for the stuff. That is
Unfucking believable.
That is incredible.
I gotta say, shout out to Queen of the Damned. Also, it has one of the best supernatural male makeup looks of any movie ever. It was actually one of the earliest films where we got the inner corner of the eye highlighting with sort of like a gold white highlight on a major Hollywood film. And I remember noticing it when it came out, like, wow, that is really fucking good. And of course, now every K-pop artist is wearing the same makeup. It looks great. I mean, it's such a good look, but not feminine. It's this just very good contouring effect. And I was gonna say, you know, one thing we're forgetting here, without Anne Rice vampires, we would not have Vampire the Masquerade.
We would not have Vampire the Masquerade. We would not have Blade.
That's right.
Oh my God.
That's right.
We certainly wouldn't have the movie Blade. Yes.
We would not have the film Blade. No.
Yeah.
Yeah, her style of vampire is where we get that white wolf urban fantasy, sexy, cool, you know, cyberpunk vampire shit. That's where it comes from.
Oh yeah.
I mean, they certainly elaborated on it, but yeah.
Yeah, I was just thinking even more obviously stuff like True Blood and like we talked about with Twilight. It's like what modern vampire media did she not impact is like the real question. Like
she's the one.
Yeah, there's so much blueprint in her work.
Absolutely. Yeah, just to pivot here ever so clumsily, because we were kind of getting into Groverhaus, and again, I guess if we are looking for a through line here,
well, we should probably ask Ruben what he thinks of Anne Rice.
Yeah, Ruben, what do you think of Anne Rice?
Because I am such a fan of Anne Rice. I'm a fan Rice.
Fan Rice, they call him.
I cook it at least twice a week. It's very good.
True.
Let me tell you, I literally don't know who Anne Rice is.
Well, listen, we wanted to get you in on the conversation because you were disconnected last week. That's why you're here today. That's why we're doing the Groverhaus follow-up. We wanted to get a couple bit of your comments because we only got just the littlest slice in the last episode, and then we'll take it from there.
Issue is it's been more than 2 days and I don't remember anything that happened.
All right. Well, part of your job today was to try and remember, but it's fine.
We gave you a whole additional 24 hours. This.
That's the opposite of what you actually want to do.
I'm going to start emailing you. I'm going to start emailing you a schedule for your entire day on the day that we record a podcast.
I've rusted all of that information out of my brain.
That's incredible, man.
All right. No, but
I am only a small expert on something else right now.
You remember vaguely what we were talking about, though, correct? You remember the idea of what the Groverhaus is, correct?
The house is bad. The house says
they made a shitty house.
Problems.
It really sucked. I was looking at what kind of code they were following, which was very loosely some amount of building code. It's a great house.
So here's my thing, Ruben. Let's say you are given the same house and then you're put in the same position as Grover. How do you not fuck it up?
To actually fix Groverhaus, I mean, the obvious first step is that you need a floor below your house. It's very important to not live on just a pit of mud. So very expensively. Well, okay, so there was one thing I do remember. The attachment house, there was something like you had to go up when you go into the attachment house, because it's built to like the right, when you walk out, there's a step that's like 12 inches tall, and then you're in the second portion because it was built a full foot higher because the foundation of the original house has sunk over time.
Yes.
Either that or the water table has risen because of climate change. I wasn't sure.
Well, the water table was so low in the first place. Yeah.
Well, the water table's high because it's a swamp.
Oh yeah, that's what I mean. Yeah, high. It's 6 inches below the surface. Low number. Yeah.
Your table's gonna be low when that water's.
That's right.
That's how you remember, Jake.
There you go.
So there's no basement. It's just on top of the swamp. There's no basement.
Just floating.
Well,
just there.
Floating in the
Groverhaus
swamp.
is basically building a basement into the side of your house.
It's effectively a
Groverhaus-
boathouse.
Groverhaus was a political statement. You see, the White House was built on a swamp.
Oh, God.
No, I digress.
We're not talking about drainers. No drainers today. No drainers.
We are draining, folks.
Down with drainers.
So like there is a picture of the completed foundation in the Groverhaus thread, but we can basically assume that this foundation, if one were to take a massive giant sized hand and push down on it, one could assume it might sink a little further into the ground.
Yeah,
Well,
because I
if
think it's just
someone were to fill-
floating on pea gravel, which has
it's
a
floating
pad
it's floating
of
on pea
concrete.
gravel and a slightly coarser rock.
Yes.
$1,000 of stone dumped in wet mud.
Yes.
And that's a foundation for you. So you could get like 5 275-gallon intermediate bulk water container tanks and put them at the corner of the house and fill them with water. And then that house will be sideways in a couple of years.
But hey, if it ever starts to flood, you got a floating house.
It's a boathouse. What they should have done was
Yeah, you got a
build-
boathouse.
They should have built the bottom of a boat onto it and then legally became boathouses. Just
Yeah,
waiting for
because
that.
I
for
don't.
climate change.
It's not like watertight, right? Like if the water table rises, I think it's just gonna soak in.
Just come right through the floor.
I mean, climate change is coming, right? And like one of the upsides of the apocalypse is we're going to get to see what happens to Groverhaus, and we can keep checking on it on Google Maps. Like it's there.
It's 2 miles north. They're dumping more gravel in real time on Google Maps.
I don't know why we don't build houses on stilts in the States. I think they do it in some parts of Louisiana, and that's it.
That would make sense. Yeah, I'm sure regionally.
Because houses are a bad business, because when you make them, you're done. You usually finish making them at a certain point. So we need the obsolescence of these houses to quicken up a little bit. I need like an 80-year house that I can't pass on to my kids.
That's
Can't
probably
have that on
true.
stilts.
There are a lot of Europeans in the original thread going, why do you Americans build your entire houses out of like pine and plaster? Like, do they actually last? And then some people in the thread who are wrong saying, oh yeah, these houses last for 300 years. And then a bunch of other people being like, well, not really. we tear them down and rebuild them.
Yeah,
I
they
think
get
it
torn
really-
down or they get renovated.
It really depends on like the structuring like of the building itself, and like certain apartment buildings or whatever are just like repurposed old buildings that are bordering on like historical landmarks. The old apartment I used to live in for like dirt cheap, my Travis Bickle apartment, basically, it was a hospital. I paid $375 a month to live in a building where, like, yeah, you hear cheap rent, you think windowless apartment, but it was incredible. The third story, opposite of Main Street, wonderful. But this was like 100+ years old building. The only downside was like the water was fucked, but the only buildings like that, yeah, it's not like pine or this or that. It's like old, legit, well done stonework that was required for the infrastructure of something like, say, a hospital.
Oh, I just literally found the comment Eliza was talking about. I found it bizarre that most American houses are mostly made of wood, while most houses in the UK are brick. And literally, Grover just says, we build from wood because it's cheap. Florida builds most concrete block because of the hurricane resistance, but elsewhere, wood is predominant. New technologies and prefab techniques may change that in the future, though. He's honestly right about that one. If you've seen any of the recent constructions in Seattle,
Have you seen
it's shittier than wood at this point.
It's shittier than wood, but are they the sort of cement 3D printing thing? I don't know if you've seen any of it.
I've seen that, but they're different. It's a different type of prefab.
They are fucking weird. It's like Lego style look to them.
Also,
those aren't
wood
cement,
is way easier to work with from an electrical / plumbing standpoint.
Mm-hmm.
Which is just like, it's also way more dangerous, isn't it? Like,
Yeah.
Yeah, because it'll fucking
fucking burn up. Yeah, or
I
get
think
wet.
a lot of it is planned obsolescence.
Of
A lot of it
course.
is just that it's fucking cheap. And if
Very
you do,
American.
if you get a lucky enough to move into like an Edwardian or Victorian building in the United States, it feels better. It feels more solid. You don't hear
Mhm.
your neighbors as much. You know,
Mhm.
it's very clearly a better house.
Mhm.
Something that does not get brought up in the thread though, which I think is probably relevant, is earthquakes. Bricks don't do well in earthquakes. So a lot of that old brick architecture that was built on the West Coast in particular has been earthquaked down.
That makes sense, actually. Yeah.
And I believe I have been told that more flexible structures are usually better in earthquakes. So in that sense, if you had a very old wooden building and it was wobbling and flexible during an earthquake as opposed to rigid and cracking, then presumably it would do better.
I was going to say it depends on the location. So I think it started happening recently. It only happened twice, and I'd never experienced like earthquake adjacent stuff. We basically get aftershocks from adjacent states where it was like high Richter scale vibrations. Like I felt it like a few times on the third floor of the fucking stone building, but it was not as big a deal in as much as like, yeah, there's a difference between that and like straight up a earthquake. Yeah, no, I would not want to be in that building during
They don't have the same kind of climate considerations as we do in the United States either. Well, they didn't. They will soon. But
oh yes,
hurricanes, tornadoes, Arizona level temperature changes, you know, like anything in a desert where it's 20 degrees at night and 120 during the day. I think that does require a different kind of building than if you're in Normandy and you can just build a stone hut and it will last for 1,000 years. So that's what I think. I mean, I'm not an expert at building stuff, but as far as that's what I've kind of been told by people who know more about it than I.
Absolutely. I was gonna say also, not to take the ball from Jake too much here, but like Ruben, in terms of like also the sort of inboard cultural reaction, like I don't know if you were always a shit stirrer on the boards where we like first hooked up and like started being in voice chats or whatever, but like weighing this out, the culture of essay and the reaction to like the board proper, if you've looked through the thread, like in terms of modship and like them straight up like gutting any negative look at this hideous, it's not even a McMansion at that point, it's like a McWhite Castle. Like that's being super generous. Like I don't know, from the outside looking in, like is it all brown nosers or is it like a lack of practical knowledge in your estimation, dog?
You mean just the armchair people purely? What
you know what I'm
their
saying,
perspective
right?
is? I would say you'd have a good mix of it, but I would say that there are definitely the surviving evidence where they scrubbed the thread clean and now it's in the archive with just people saying nice comments. I mean, your ratio is still there of maybe like the 20% of people that lack practical knowledge and are like, it's impressive that you're building a house. But you know, by and large, people just had it on the ground running to be like, you know, floor bearing drywall. You laid new foundation that's a foot higher than your old fucking foundation. That should be pretty worrying. House isn't sealed in any way meaningfully once the I mean, you can see how close the water line is to the foundation. One of the photos is when they're out there just trying to dig a hole to lay the foundation and find out how fucked the mud is. You can see like a corner of the house's foundation exposed from the mud. And how like his knee is at his foundation and his ankle is in water.
Yeah, that famous picture of him standing literally knee deep in a swamp.
Oh my god. Yeah.
Foundation of my house sticking out in the swamp.
Day one of him digging is
all of those people digging
finding the water.
it looks like World War I style like trenches, and they're all like
And the apparent
smiling.
reality that he probably moved like 2 wheelbarrows, and then his wife did a bunch of drugs and then dug till 3 a.m. by hand these giant trenches.
He got an Adderall prescription while he was posting for 8 hours a day. Yeah. The original thread hasn't been scrubbed. I think some of the pictures have been deleted, but because Grover was a mod at the time that he was posting, nobody said shit to him during the whole original thread. It was only on the satellite forums on FIAD and LF, which stand for fuck you and die and laissez-faire respectively. When those threads started up and people started pointing out how bad the house was, that's when it really turned over and turned into the phenomenon that it is today.
Ooh, this is where I kind of wanted to also just pivot here again. I wanted to ask you this because you can actually assume a first person here as opposed to us being the outside looking in. So the culture of mods, I mean, you and I have talked about this a few times, sort of like it's a double-edged sword of SA modship. And we talked about it when we made, well, you made, but you know, we had the idea together, the board we have, but like SA modship, right? Like the culture of people sort of quaking in their boots against Grover, which is like internet mods, the contempt for them is like they're all doughy and soft as shit, but like the cultural power they can wield against you within a subculture where it's like you have to do mild social engineering as a baseline to have a good community. Like people take that shit and run with it. Like, what did that look like for SA in your estimation? I know it's a big question, but like from the outside looking in, well, we had our own mods that we were a little tenuous with, and I'd met like a bunch of the mods in the day.
And these you're talking about mods on what, Penny Arcade?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I lived with an admin / mod for example. Right. I'm not gonna go too deep, but yeah, crazy shit essentially.
I think moderatorship it's a fascinating subject. We could do an entire episode on running online communities because
yes,
it is actually a fine art. And that is, I think, one of the reasons why Something Awful has been so successful in one sense of the word, and not exclusively successful, obviously, because they've produced a lot of garbage as well, but they are a self-sustaining community which somehow maintains a certain level of equilibrium. And I think, mods are responsible for some of that. There was always discussion with people that continues to this day, actually, even ex-goons, people who never post there anymore, about who is a good mod, who is a bad mod. An example of a good mod would be T-Fin. T-Fin, I don't think I ever saw him, ban somebody who didn't deserve it. I never saw him, enforce the rules in a way that made me think this guy's a fucking asshole. It's sort of being a good moderator is more like not doing negative actions as opposed to doing more positive actions. I'm definitely not an expert on the moderatorship of Something Awful, but Grover was universally considered to be a fucking loser and an asshole and stupid, just making just bad decisions on the board, bad decisions in life, bad decisions on his house. And these, as he got more full of himself and posted more about, his inner life and his ideas, this kind of snowballed until finally he was run out of the place where he was a moderator, which was a GIP, aka Goons and Platoons, which was the sub-forum for members of the armed forces, which Grover is not. He is a contractor for the U.S. Navy. And so this was, a case of actual stolen valor. This guy going, "Oh yeah, I'm in the army, you guys. I'm a troop." And I think I posted about this in my Twitter thread that somebody got a screenshot of what the Goons and Platoons sort of readership sent to the moderator community, which was, could you please demod this guy? He's a fucking asshole. He's not actually in the military. He makes bad decisions and he's stupid. The most famous example of this is, well, there are two. The first one is Grover's uncritical support of the F-22 jet fighter project, which was the plane that was a huge piece of shit right before the F-35, which is
a bigger
piece of shit. So the F-22 required I just read some posts about this. Circa 2009, the F-22 required like 45 hours and something like $44,000 worth of ground crew maintenance for every hour that it was actually in flight. So, and these planes are replacing old standbys like the F-16, the F-4.
And not to interrupt, but that's like, when you talk about that, it's not in a grouping. You're talking about one individual.
One plane.
Yeah, one plane.
An individual plane, if an F-22 flew on a mission for 1 hour, it would have to land and be subjected to 2 days and $44,000 worth of mechanical repairs and recalibration.
That cost is also associated with the cost for the plane itself and life cycle, which is projected to be 40 years, is $678 million per Raptor.
Jesus Christ.
So, and what's funny is just for the outside looking in, why I asked that question is, also know anytime America does any sort of contractor sort of work and farming out work to someone else, they do lowest bidder contractor stuff. When we were doing anything to the moon or anything with air superiority, air quotes like this, and even why we've moved to drone piloting, etc., where we have some piece of shit eating Burger King and bombing the wedding and then bombing the funeral subsequently. It's always to make this process cheaper. And the F-22 was the cheapest incarnation of that. And it's like a small town's amount of like X amount of tax money or whatever for like a day doing this. For one individually, let alone a fleet of these fuckers. Those aircraft carriers, that is 3,000 or so people on one of those things.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, as of 2011, the F-22 program cost more than $65 billion. And that was as of 2011. So probably now that amount has doubled.
Anytime you've seen like a homeless person just live in abject misery, absolute terror, absolutely miserable, smells like dog shit and absolutely sketch weed or completely methed out, like a not insignificant amount of that is like, we have to gut social services or any sort of social safety net to support the infrastructure for something so wildly inefficient as that. And you want to know what? That is the cheapest incarnation of that.
Right. So Grover fucking loved the F-22, and I'm not sure if I don't know what his opinion on the F-35 is, but probably worse. I'm sure he tripled down on it. But someone in one of the Grover threads on LF said, reminder that Grover defended the F-22, saying that if they stopped, they wouldn't be able to maintain aircraft research and the Chinese might close the 25-year-long technology gap.
Yeah, he has a bunch of weird or just, I guess, like pro-West stuff. He also gets made fun of in one of those threads for talking about a conspiracy between Iran and Venezuela to house nukes in Venezuela and threaten the US. It's just very silly. Like, someone links to that opinion and goes like, a mod is in charge of this thread. Like,
absolutely.
A mod is out here on our forum just like doing a conspiracy theory thread. what the fuck?
I'm sure a primary concern of Grover's would just be the cost disparity between the 22 and the 35. Because even though the F-35 has a lower starting cost, it's only $91 million compared to $600 million, but the life cycle sustaining cost is $1 trillion per F-35. I'm sure that's a hard line point you could keep making about the F-22.
The flying guillotine, is that called?
So
Sorry.
Grover was infamous not only for his opinions on the F-22 program, but probably the most infamous single Grover post was his opinion on the invasion of Baghdad, which is a list of basically in the form of an FAQ about the Iraq War, which I will read aloud from now, if that's
Oh, hell yeah. That's what's
okay.
up, folks.
Here we go. How long will it take to capture Baghdad? 2 days. Will Saddam be killed? Yes. Total Iraqi civilian casualties, 500 dead. Total military casualties in Iraq, 3,000 dead. Total military casualties in the US, 15 dead. Will the Iraqi army regulars hold the lines? No. Will the Republican Guard fight to the end? No. Will chem or bioweapons be used on invading troops? Yes. Will Saddam launch attacks on the Kurds? Yes. Will Saddam launch attacks on Israel? No. If yes, will Israel retaliate harshly? Yes. Will Saddam sacrifice Baghdad, aka gas or nuke it? No. Will the Kurds make a grab for independence? Yes. Will Iran do anything silly like try for land? Yes. Will Saddam burn the oil fields? Yes. How long will the US be occupying Iraq? 15 years.
Well,
I mean, I'm not going to lie. There are
Wait.
some interesting things. Oh,
Here's the best one. Will the Iraq War catalyze increased terrorism in America? No.
Yikes.
In the long run, will this war be good or bad for the world? Good.
Easy answer,
mean,
obviously.
Yeah, no.
Gosh.
Yeah, I was going to say like 1 million dead people later.
And then he enumerates the individual civilian casualties by giving examples.
Holy shit.
What the
like a civilian asleep in their house is killed when their house is targeted by a smart bomb and blown up. He gives a list of 7 scenarios.
He's fucking precogging. He's like he's fucking Tom Cruise. He's trying to prevent the future war crimes.
He ends the post by saying, "My point is that there are a lot of civilians directly supporting the military that aren't exactly innocent and would be rightly counted." He does a lot of typos. Like he's more rightly counted among the military casualties rather than civilian. I'm a civilian and work for the US military, but I acknowledge I'm also a valid military target because of what I do.
Oh my fucking God.
Yeah,
All
he's
right,
special. He's very special. Grover's very,
he says this a few times.
Special.
He went into, I don't have the quotes for this, but it is sort of just a well-trammeled piece of lore about Grover, is that he went into a do or die flame war about whether or not he was an equitable target as a US military officer, like enlisted officer. And it came down to him comparing what he made per year versus officers and saying that this made him a valid military target and therefore he was in just as much danger as everybody else.
Quick question, pre or post invasion?
I actually don't know the date.
Probably preemptive.
But I think it's pre.
All right.
One of the most famous something awful posts of all time was the GBS thread about the Twin Towers being attacked. And I cannot remember the poster's name, unfortunately. I wish I did. He posted one line, all caps, that just said, "Watch Bush start a fucking war."
Yeah.
Absolutely. I was got to say, yeah, no. Honestly, the sort of pathology of SA post 9/11 is probably one of the biggest formative moments for like lefty Twitter and a lot of I want to say writers that would like work at cafe and various outlets, etc., or people that would do left pivots that sort of form the podcasting intelligentsia now. And I want to say 2/3 of these fucking people were essay posters at one point or another. And like a lot of these groups of people's like formative moments were just absolutely being pissed off at not just modship, but also sort of enforced prevailing norms at places like SA. So it's interesting to like sort of hear the first person on that now. But God, one of the crazy parts of it, not just the inefficiencies, but then it being informed by a guy where it's almost like a sort of exhibitionist act. Watch me build my shitty home and then watch me authoritatively say like this or that way of doing things. Like, this is my view of it. And actually, you have to comport to these things. It's how a lot of mod resentment builds. I thought about this as it related to being a poster a long time ago. I won't get too in the weeds, but I realized all of the warnings I got on the message board in the past. I've never gotten hard banned. I've maybe got weak bans, but it's like 12 because I would just always be like a rule skirter. But a lot of mods want to say I'm operating off of the baselines, but really someone like Grover or whoever, or on the PA boards, was more like their specific discrete view. You better make yourself fucking aware of, and you better dance to the tune of.
Well, yeah, one thing about something awful mods, at least from my knowledge, like you could get, like, I think on the forum we were on, it was a little more rulesy because there was like less people and less chaos. But like I've looked at ban logs and something awful, and motherfuckers get banned for 6 hours for not liking onions. Like it's a very goofy place.
But Eliza and I do agree on one thing. Low tax may have been a piece of shit, but there is an interesting thing about SA's golden rule was it's that like personal discretion. It's less playing to a sort of algorithmic sense of rule enforcement. If you've been on social media, you know how it feels to be at the mercy of a robot. If
Right.
you've been on SA, even if a fucking idiot made that decision, you're still moored to the human experience and human condition.
There's a literal person to appeal to most times too.
Absolutely.
It does end up there being more justice, I guess, in a quantitative sense, on a forum that is moderated by people as opposed to, automatic bans for word usage or whatever. And, at the time, I would not have said that was the case. At the time, I would have said, wow, I can't wait until we get, automatic moderation. It's going to make a lot of this stuff better because that bastard just banned me again. Turns out it's not true at all. It is the fucking opposite. There were a lot of interesting ways to get banned on something awful. One of them is called a talks clause, which is basically where you make the ultimate wager. You say, if something happens or doesn't happen, I will, give up my account. I'll get banned. So a talks clause, I think, was named after the first poster who did it. And it's like saying, if something doesn't happen, I'll eat my hat. But you're basically putting your $10 on the line because that's how much it costs to register a new account. I feel like I had something else to say about Plains or Grover, or I can't remember what it was though.
We're hitting edits done. Sorry. But yeah, I was thinking just to take a step back. I think the other funny thing about sort of Grover and that contractor mindset and a specific type of freelance person that I find funny is like someone that's been in comics or whatever, and then there's a perception of a experience from the outward set, and then there's the reality for the person that actually has to do the work. So the people that actually are at risk being a contractor in, say, a place like Iraq are going to be two types of people. One, someone that absolutely, I don't know if this is bannable. We could talk about this later, but if anyone did deserve to die in America, or excuse me, that was American, that was in Iraq or Afghanistan, it would be an American private military service contractor, or what we said in the past about something like this, a fucking mercenary.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, we're not disputing that. I'm
Black-
assuming Grover was a guy in a
Eric
computer somewhere.
Eric Prince's Blackwater. These were the people that basically would work in tandem with the CIA, or would basically work with hired or fired military intelligence, former military, and intelligence people that basically got ran out of circulation but stayed in circulation by working through contractors who would do dirty. One of the things that, I asked you earlier, Eliza, about when Grover said what he said when he said it, was one of the biggest early things about Americans getting absolutely rinsed in Iraq was the dead bodies of private military service contractors being set on fire on a bridge, and they would show like something ghoulish, like a fucked up and blown apart truck and these dead PMCs. But PMCs in Iraq, if you read about it, and it's even why like people like Chelsea Manning would eventually like effectively like start narking on the government on large, and not just like PMCs, was that like these people did nakedly dirty stuff, not just Fallujah, but like a Marine response, a common Marine response through people that would like post about Marine shit on 4chan and essay or this or that. When an IED explosion, for example, would happen in city quarters, what they would do is they would basically start unloading on every living human person. They would just start rinsing men, women, and children. And if they had a cell phone in their hand or some shit like that, because of how functionally IEDs work, is they would like hook up something that would basically get a signal, like an unexploded war shell or whatever, and that's how the improvised explosive device would work. It would be a cell phone strapped to that. You call that, and then big old blast. So the rationale of like Marine response to that would be like, well, we're preserving life for this or that.
Right.
So you've got like 30 dead civilians, 50 dead civilians, or maybe just like something like 12 dead civilians, 8 dead civilians, just walking around in public, and they're already fucking shell shock, and they've met this violence, and they're like going through that. And yeah. And so like the straight up military aren't great, but then PMCs would be the people doing brokering of deals. Like they would feed resistance forces in Afghanistan, etc. Like child sex slaves, etc. Demons. So it's like Grover was fawning to be held like to being like a heightened or to the same level as a lot of those people. It's such a weird fucking thing to desire. And why I say that is it was a big point of divergence for a lot of people. You observe that for a long enough time, and you saw in the wild, like disillusioned soldiers that were just like, that is the meat grinder that not only I've been a cog in, but I'm affecting that on other living human beings. I was like a patriot, and I did this coming out of my late teens, and this whole machine is fucking evil.
Well,
like,
the move towards PMCs started in earnest after Vietnam, because they saw what happens if you actually draft civilians into the military. And what happens is massive rebellion. You get fragging of officers. You get people just putting down there's that book Dispatches, which Apocalypse Now is based on. which is partially fictionalized, but it's sort of like a Mark Twain memoir where, this stuff actually happened. He just sort of put it together into a more cohesive narrative. He definitely tells the stories we all know about Vietnam, like necklaces of ears. One guy had a photo album of just kills, serial killer shit.
Yeah.
But there was a lot of other stuff which was like borderline occult. He describes arriving at one army base. And that wasn't army, excuse me, it was Marines. He was writing about the Marines, who were the ones who went really crazy in Vietnam. Again, because Michelle mentioning the Marines in particular. Showing up at a forward base and finding in a delta pattern laid out on a trail in the jungle, everybody's packs all facing the same direction and nobody there. Everyone was gone. Like a Roanoke type thing, except an actual mystery instead of somebody leaving a note saying that they went out for milk. This shit happened so much in Vietnam. I think the higher ups really learned, and also people coming home, people who had previously been civilians who had been drafted and being like, wow, it's really fucked up over there. We should really stop this war. And then getting the actual mass media involved in an anti-war movement. They never wanted that to happen again. And the way to make sure that it never happens again is to privatize the fucking military. So
yeah, most of a not insignificant amount of people in PMCs are former troops that got told, yo, you came here to kill, you came here to make money. You weren't going to make any money doing what you were doing originally. Imagine you get to kill like pretty much full carte blanche.
Yeah,
the U.S. military. And by the way,
to throw in a pop culture, like we see this played in pop culture on TV shows like Barry more recently, where like the idea of soldiers, there are soldiers out there who want to join the military to kill people, and they are maybe not better served, but they are catered to by these PMC companies.
Yeah. I have an in-law. that used to fuck around with a military guy where he was an Afghanistan army guy. He wasn't a Marine because, like, I'll say this, I'm not trying to moralize too much or like say one group this or that or the other. I've never heard stories about Marines having shoe boxes or whatever, but like this guy, the Southern boy, legit has a box of Afghani dead kids, kids he blew apart. And I mean, if you want a greater pop culture thing to like draw off of now, like the Trump guy, Eddie Gallagher, like the operator guy, that other SEALs were like, this is not Vietnam. You're just firing in the crowds. We fucked with his sights so we would stop nailing people instantaneously. Just sickos. Like it is weird to kind of think about it, but it's like who gets lionized or whatever, who gets that cult of personality.
Yeah. So my father is a silent generation. Actually, he's not even a boomer. He's even older. He is a 2-tour Vietnam vet. He was an intelligence service captain who now is 100% anti-Vietnam. He refers to it only as the fiasco, etc. And he was Army. He was in 1st Cavalry Division, which right at the Valkyries on helicopters. Those were the guys. That's 1st Cav. They had the highest casualties. They saw the most action. It's amazing that he got out of there with all of his limbs intact. So a lot of my opinions about Vietnam and the military, etc., come from the position of, this guy who lived through it all and has really horrible PTSD, saw all of the same shit that you see in the movies because that was the same division he was in. And then came back and said, this is bullshit, and joined Veterans for Peace and made it very clear to both of his children growing up, we are forbidden from joining the military. Just you cannot be involved in that shit. His opinion on the PMC versus draftees thing is that national service should be a requirement. In the sense that it is in most Scandinavian countries.
There was
South Korea. Yeah.
Because you get the Vietnam effect where if there are just normal kids, normal 18-year-olds from the suburbs in your army, and they are making up the bulk of your infantry, you tend to get into a lot less shit than you do when you have hardened fucking mercenaries doing most of your shit work. Because it forces the public to have an interest. It forces mom and dad at home to wonder where little Jimmy is being sent. And I think he's right, short of like the total dissolution of the armed forces, which of course is the ideal, right? If it has to exist, then there should be national service because it forces an interest from the civilian sector. Because as it is now, most of us on the West Coast, the majority of the liberal elites that live in Seattle and that I am friends with, I don't know a single person in the military right now personally. I just don't know it. I just don't know anyone. And that's true of, I think, the majority of the people in my immediate peer group, because of where I live, because of the politics of where I live, because of the class issues of where I live.
I have one friend in the area who would have served a long time ago, even not was retired from the military when I met him, which would have been like 8 years ago. So it's that's how little he does not have any military friends around the area. It's like very rare.
I'd say the people that I ever did meet or know that like straight up were in the service or whatever, like historically it's been when I've worked factory jobs, and even then the job market was so bad or shitty, especially like I think the job where I was in Washington the second time before I did all this shit that led to the comic was like that guy in particular, he was a naval officer and he had trouble finding work.
Yeah.
That was my buddy had worked in the Navy on a nuclear submarine and was like having trouble finding a decent job.
Free subsidized fucking college, the full ride, everything. That, I mean, things aren't great now, but comparatively, you want to talk like early Afghanistan, Iraq war stuff. It was bleak. I would not have been a full service sex worker. I couldn't imagine, coming out of the service and having all of the things to your name and still not being able to get work. And that was done through like a temp agency, basically, that was temp to hire. But terrible. Sorry, I mean, I know we love tangents, but beyond just like that sort of lionization or whatever of armed services, and that informing like a certain type of libertarian freak sort of mod, like the general culture of modship, where you can kind of have those distinct identities. Do you think it was like, I want to say like unique to SA? I think like, was it just a message board thing, period? I say this because I won't take too much time, but like, do any of you remember Jack Thompson?
Of course.
Oh yeah. Jack Thompson emailed me legal threats when I was in the biz.
Yeah.
So you've probably remembered Dennis McCauley's GamePolitics.com before he got bought up by the ESA, right? You ever heard of Game Politics? Ooh, it was a WordPress, and Jack Thompson was a regular on there. I would basically yell at Jack Thompson in the comments, and McCauley didn't know I was a teen at the time. I actually became a mod on his message board, and they knew me for my red text and like, you guys got to stop posting about hentai games in the forums. And I was constantly, oh man, I was drunk on power as a mod in the day. And I like came up, my first bit of like online clout was being a teen and yelling at Jack Thompson about Israel firing missiles into Palestine, and he was a slime ball, and that he isn't even Jewish, and that is Zionism nakedly obscene. It was really fucking weird. And
He's
this is all
evangelical, right?
well,
Isn't he?
evangelicals are like bigger Zionists.
Oh, I
than, like,
know. Yeah.
than like a lot of straight up Zionist Jewish people, because
Well,
like
they're trying to
way
bring
this-
about the apocalypse. Yeah.
they quite literally believe in apocalyptic death cult stuff,
Yep.
like Mike Huckabee shit.
Mm-hmm.
And like, if I can recognize that, and I barely have abstractions down, is like, good Lord. I observed that. And I remember being like sort of infamous in my time there. So like was Grover the only type of this person?
No, there were lots of bad mods. And of course, who was or was not a bad mod was very subjective.
Mm-hmm.
You know, I actually can't think of any other names. There were certainly people that I fucking hated. I think Axe Maniac is probably one of the all-time worst, like objectively worst mods ever. This was the guy who threw a Duke Nukem Forever release party. Is this ringing bells? Does anyone else know this story?
No. No.
Oh
That's
God.
sick.
You know, I actually
You mean like Half-Life era?
I have to go to the kitchen and get a small snack because I can feel myself getting a little woozy.
Actually,
So I'm
for
gonna
it.
let's
Go
take
for
a
it.
quick break.
yeah,
that's fine.
absolutely. Ruben, you still there, homie?
Keep rolling if you want to.
Yep.
I'll just be right
Yeah,
back.
I'm just gonna.
No,
keep it
no,
rolling.
I'm
It's
gonna
easier
take
for
a
me.
break too.
Yeah, but we'll keep the Zoom
Alright.
up, is what I'm saying.
Oh, absolutely.
Keep the
Yeah.
Zoom up, I guess.
So I'm gonna bring us back in by saying that I've been researching this whole time on the threads, and even people within Something Awful, I can't find consensus. I do not know the origin of the phrase load-bearing drywall. It seems to have memed its way into being about Groverhaus, but I cannot find Grover actually saying that phrase. And
Yeah.
then I found someone else asking that in the make fun of Grover thread. They literally go, I feel like every time we talk about this, load-bearing drywall comes up. And I can't find him saying it. And all I can find is evidence that apparently it was a joke by a poster named T-Pain with an E at the end.
T-Pain was a great poster. Yeah.
Okay,
Mhm.
that's what I wanted to bring up. I wanted to ask if that rang any bells for you.
Yeah,
'cause
T-Pain is very funny. T-Pain was one of the T-Pain's an LF poster, I think.
Hmm.
Almost all of the funny posters comes from either Fiad, Biob to a certain extent. I'm gonna say Hell Dump, even though people are gonna get mad at me about it. And Hell Dump is a whole other episode. And
Oof.
LF. LF was like Fiad started taking itself a little bit more seriously. Because LF was originally made to split off the Ron Paul people.
Oh,
Of course.
Wow.
Wow, yeah, what a
Wow.
throwback.
Yeah, it was made to split off the Ron Paul people and quarantine them from the rest of the forum. But what happened is a bunch of leftists got in there and just took over and drove all of the Ron Paul people out. And so it turned into this incubation chamber for what we now think of as the dirtbag Twitter left. And it was the act of banning the LF posters.
Yeah.
Well, there was a period of persecution and then followed by a total closure / ban of LF that drove those people onto Twitter and started weird Twitter. So that's what happened. It was exactly the same process as the hentai ban of a few years before, leading to the creation of 4chan.
Oh, sure, because
Oh, Lord.
yeah, they said, hey, no more anime titties on the forums. And
Now I
then-
feel like double
yeah.
fucking.
Well,
now
specifically, no more lolicon. That
I'm
was
sure.
that was the
Absolutely, yeah.
issue. And
I mean, yeah.
there is a thread still in the archive of dozens of Something Awful posters going, well, I think I actually said this in the last episode. You know, it's a very funny thread. We should revisit it at some point. So yeah, that's what happened.
Lord, I think about it now. Like one thing I looked into with 4chan was like mapping this out after a certain point in time is like 4chan like eventually banned like lolicon whatever specifically, and then it led off to specific
8chan.
more,
Yeah.
8chan, and then
A new one pops up every time.
darker stuff, which was 2chan or whatever, which would then lead to other sites where I did image mod work. Like I have the PTSD, or is what Liza talked about, PTSD, the more internationally recognized thing outside of the States, which is that, I would have to get rid of child porn regularly or file reports for it. And so like, that shit actually does brain damage to you. Like you will get recurring nightmares or what is it, like, air quotes, what people colloquially joke about now as intrusive thoughts or this or that. You would be like, try to draw back and not think about awful things you saw. And it's just, they were that bad.
Yeah.
Well, it's the same as like, I mean, that used to be, not to like obviously image moderation is a more concentrated version of this, but you used to roll those dice every time you were scrolling through 4chan on /B when I was in like high school.
Oh yeah.
Like I could absolutely run into something I would not want to, nor should I legally be able to see on the internet, just because of the circumstance of being on there when someone broke the rules at the same time, right?
Yeah.
That's always a die roll. And
Oh, yeah.
it definitely isn't as much these days, mostly because of stuff like that image moderation work that has its own weird fucking toll on people. But that's something I just put together now, where it's like, I can't think of the last time I've been scrolling through the internet in a supposedly relatively unmoderated space and seen something I wasn't supposed to, if that makes sense. Like, not that I'm out there doing that all the time, but just feels like that ever-presentness was much more out there when I was younger, when I was like a teenager. And because it was the Wild West of 4chan days.
Yeah, it is definitely an interesting psychological effect. And I'm kind of thinking about the outline of the essay. I have about it in my head and thinking it is again an entire different episode.
Oh yeah.
It's bad shit. It can fuck you up. And the culture on 4chan of, well, if you can't take the heat, get out of the kitchen kind of thing, turned into sort of a self-brainwashing cycle of, I'm going to get on 4chan at 3:00 in the morning, look at the absolutely most upsetting shit that I can.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And it changes your brain, whether you see that stuff accidentally or whether you are going to seek it out. It causes a chemical change in your brain, and part of the action, the results are PTSD or CPTSD, as Michelle said, and it can cause you can become addicted to the adrenaline and to the cortisol that you get.
Right.
And the third thing that's interesting is that when people have PTSD, contrary to what we thought was the case, we found out a few years ago in research that people with PTSD, clinically diagnosed PTSD, and I include CPTSD, actually have a lower resting level of cortisol, which is quote unquote the stress hormone, than normal people. So this would account for my own personal experience where, for example, if I go to a protest and it turns into a riot and I'm there for 10 hours with cops shooting at me, I feel great. I feel normal. I feel like I can get housework done. I feel like I can have a conversation with somebody without, wanting to like go home and crawl under my sofa. I have energy. I digest food better. I feel normal. And it's because I've had finally that dump of cortisol into my system to deal with the riot situation has gotten me up to a normal level of functioning cortisol, as everyone else around me has all the time. Because when normal people are put into a riot, they get way too much cortisol. And that causes panic and it causes you to go into shock. But if you are the kind of person who has experienced trauma chronically, your body ratchets down the amount of cortisol that is circulating in your system normally, because it needs you to be ready for the chronic stress that it has learned that you are going to be under. So it teaches your body to be basically under aroused, and you end up needing to seek out extreme experiences in order to feel adjusted or normal.
I don't want to get too in the weeds on this. I'd say sort of anecdotally, I wouldn't say it was completely tied to that, but yeah, no, I think whenever I unroll the created Twitter I have for fucking moving forward with this and the wartime clout economy as defined in Metal Gear Solid 5, the Phantom Pain, like my exhibitionism or whatever, Tumblr onward or this or that was, oh, hey, all of this complex pain or this or that. I saw a lot of people just basically go into reinterpretations of this or that and trying to make like woker versions of basically Lolicon or Shotokan or any of the child sexual assault paraphilias. And it's just like, that's not for me. I think I did embrace horniness, not just out of a sense of survival or reinterpretation of trauma towards an effect where I could just have it on my terms. Was just the greater thing of on my terms had to cross over into something bigger, which was not just how I felt pleasure in my life, but also how I felt pleasure in my work, and not necessarily being professional on the same terms as others or this or that. Like Eliza and I may have like a playful back and forth, or Eliza will have hard boundaries with this or that with my own nudity, but like Eliza was never mad or whatever when I showed other people's this or that or whatever, or my sort of thought cataloging and curation of horny. But yeah, no, I could see that being a hard boundary with the person, you know.
No, Michelle, I don't want porn on my Twitter timeline at all. It's
I mean,
worse when it's somebody I know, because if I'm just hanging out with somebody and I look over and they're showing me their asshole, that's not an appropriate time or place for that.
Yeah,
I mean,
Michelle,
at
we
the
can
same
talk about
time.
this. You can talk about your beehole on the internet.
You can talk about it. It's
I
rude
was
to post a
eating-
picture of it.
I was eating fucking dinner, Michelle, and I remember meeting you over your fucking asshole on my screen.
I don't care, man.
And I was like, "This is how
I
it
told
goes."
everyone. I told everyone. I was
My
open.
asshole's dropping.
I was open in the metaphorical
She
sense.
has a T-shirt that says "post hole." She's always wearing a T-shirt that says "post
Yeah,
hole."
no. All of the people talking about hole on me now.
I'm posting Malone
fucking on my fucking shoulders. Swear to God.
Posting
You
porn
cowards.
and posting nudity and forcing your friends to make a choice about, are they going to accept your butthole in their faces at all times, or are they going to betray you emotionally by unfollowing you? That is a classic coping mechanism. In fact, it's one of the red flags that they use to see whether a child has been abused or not.
Oh my God.
Is this kid inappropriately nude in public places? Yes. Well, we should probably get them into therapy.
Yeah, we should intervene. This is it's not a 14-year-old doing this. I was open about the type of fucking weirdo I was, but that's a whole different episode.
No,
I need to stop
I think
saying hole.
what's maladaptive about it is your refusal to just put it into an After Dark account.
I had done After Dark accounts. It was just also I've got feelings on that I can throw more time into, because I don't feel it is as simple as this or that. And obviously
It really is, though. It really is. There's two doors. Behind door number 1 is hanging out with my buddy Michelle. Behind door number 2 is seeing Michelle's asshole. If you showed me your asshole every single time you and I went to a bar together, I wouldn't hang out with you in person either. So I'm not going to hang out with you online if I have to see your butthole to do it. I'm not going to do it.
You hung out with Charlie. You probably have seen Charlie's asshole more than I had seen Charlie's asshole.
I absolutely have not, because Charlie did not post that shit to Maine. I think it's an emotional test that you're giving your friends. Either you accept me at my worst or fuck you. That's what I think. That is my diagnosis. If I was like an 80s Freudian talk therapist and you were my patient, like lying down on the sofa, that's what I would say.
Michelle, can I get permission to use your posting buttholes as an example in my schooling?
Hi, buddy. See,
no.
Jake's gonna write a fucking essay because
Oh,
I'm right.
I was
He
about to
knows I'm right.
You want to talk about that?
It's all anonymous.
what's
All
worse?
anonymous. I just have a friend. I just have a
Please
friend.
study.
This is
I have a
person
friend
outwardly.
named Mary Ann, not Michelle,
Ann,
and
yeah.
she posts whole a lot.
I will say, which of the two of us was willing to commodify it versus me never monetizing? That's all I'm gonna say, homie.
You were a sex worker.
Yeah,
I've never
Michelle,
advertised my services
just
on
take
me.
your licks. Take your
That
licks.
was
though.
full service. I wasn't cam. That's a
Oh,
fundamental
goodness.
difference.
There's you're either selling. I mean, of course, there's a difference. Obviously, experientially,
Yeah.
conceptually, no, there's not a difference. It's still sex work.
I disagree, but
Oh,
that's
I'm
Also-
writing. We got to do that episode.
ooh,
That's something to
Also-
work on for the new year.
I know lots of sex workers that are nude like
Mhm.
that. In fact, one of the earliest experiences I had with it was with a friend of mine I was in a play with. Actually, a play based on a Poppy Z. Bright novel, Poppy Z. Bright being the spiritual
That's
successor
the-
to Anne Rice. Okay, so I was in this.
Just for our readers or listenership, Poppy Z. Bright is the dead name / former authorial name of a now trans man / trans mask author. You may know them from writing early Matrix comic stuff, as well as gender fuck style stuff and goth stuff.
Yes, and
for the uninitiated.
the only reason I use the name Poppy Z. Bright is because
Mhm.
Billy Martin, as he is known now,
Yes.
he still uses that name to refer to himself.
Yes.
So it's that is the only reason that I'm using
Oh,
the
yeah,
dead
yeah,
name.
no.
And those books, the Lost Souls series, are still published under Poppy Z. Bright and not
Mhm.
under Billy Martin. So
As long as it's that person's choice, that sounds
No,
pretty,
it's not
pretty cool.
it's
Then,
not
yeah.
an excuse. I just want
yeah,
for anyone that's aware.
But yeah, if you were to
That
Google
was-
the author, it's a good point. to make.
that's a very good clarification to make, and I should have made it
No
made it
worries.
myself.
It happens. It's all good.
Church Cream
It's
is
all love. It's a
bothering
team
me
game,
about
baby.
peanut
Team
butter.
game.
No, I'm saying that I think that a lot of sex workers, including myself, who have been in situations where, you are economically, if you are finding yourself in a situation where you are economically doing sex work
Mhm.
and you are consenting to it, but under duress, economic duress, or, situational duress or whatever, and you're not like completely, yes, I'm choosing to be a stripper because I want to be, as opposed to I got to pay some rent. All of the sex workers, fellow sex workers I know who have been in that situation have embraced voluntary, uncapitalized nudity as a way of coping and recontextualizing their own bodies, and it's good. It is a good functional, adaptive coping mechanism, and I endorse it. It's a good thing to do.
Yeah. Oh yeah. I will concede. I do think comporting it in the way that you've talked about for other people makes sense for them. For me, I'm not trying to say air quotes I'm different, but my brain, the way my brain works is super duper fucked up. I can acknowledge outright I'm a hard person to be friends with for a long time. It does make the relationships I retain that much more interesting because, yeah, if it's as simple as a social media unfollow, but still staying in contact with the person, fucking A, that's fine. Absolutely.
It's a way of means testing friendship, and I don't think that that's a terrible thing to do. I think
Yeah.
it makes complete rational sense that your brain would want to behave that way.
Yeah, that's the thing.
But
yeah.
I'd be remiss not to bring up, like, I've used social media similarly, just not as
Mhm.
extremely,
Mhm.
like for putting like I'm just gonna throw this thought out there. Someone doesn't like it, then fuck it. I will know that
Yep.
they do not like it, and that's good for me.
Mhm.
Yeah, I
Um,
would never demonize
Just not with
that, you
nudity.
know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
Oh yeah. But then in my head also, like, philosophically, it's just how many people speak in favor of like killing X amount of people or this or that way through like sort of legal means of this state, etc. where it's like the worst thing you can see in your day is whole. Like, count yourself lucky, you fucking nerd. Generally, not individually here, but
No, I get what you're. I get that.
It's definitely I think if we were to like really litigate it closely, it comes down to competing accessibility requirements. So like I need to do A in order to feel comfortable, but doing A makes person B feel uncomfortable. So then it becomes a negotiation, and that's fine. That's a civilized way to maintain social relationships, is to have that negotiation. Right. Yeah. Like, because I want to continue being friends with Michelle, I just give her shit about it. I'm like, I don't want to see your fucking butthole, dude. And she's like,
and you're far from the only one, I should say.
Right.
But I think the other thing is I for me, and sort of tying it to our greater themes, is like, it's hard for me to maintain friendships with a lot of people where a sense of friction and connection and back and forth is non-existent, because then you surround yourself with yes men, and you never push yourself forward or make decisions determinant upon you working within the schema of the group versus being a lone wolf and being alone. I feel like most of my friend circle is definitely loners working themselves into the greater group, what that looks like, and doing that on their terms. It's why I've sort of worked with very alienated and very disconnected people. It's why message boards and this sort of ephemera really speaks to me on a personal level, because, like, good heavens, how many bad phenomena in our world sort of happen because that friction does not occur, where someone doesn't tell you no, or whatever.
Well, I was just going to say that sort of combative attachment style forces constant discussion and communication. So that's good.
It's
can
great.
Be very functional.
It was great that Lana was telling me, like, she's 100% about my whole deal, but like, you're like, no, fuck that. I want to see that on Maine. I was at Thanksgiving and I saw a hole.
Truly, Michelle, truly, like I scrolled Twitter at a office job, and you specifically were one of the reasons I had to keep my monitors positioned in very certain ways, so that nobody could see what I was scrolling on.
Right, but some part of Michelle enjoys hearing that, or she wouldn't do it.
Oh, absolutely. I know.
When Jake's, when I say you motherfucker, I had to hide hole at Thanksgiving dinner. What Michelle is hearing is, I love you so much, I'm willing to put up with this level of bullshit that you cause in my life in order to keep being your friend.
No.
What do you mean no?
I would say no, because that implies a level of contempt for the connection.
It doesn't have to be.
There are X amount of followers.
Yeah, I don't read it as contempt.
There are like X amount of followers or whatever. Some of those processes that you're talking about, those also aren't necessarily a conscious choice. Some of what you're talking about.
No, it doesn't have to be conscious. That's what I'm saying. Most attachment styles are not conscious.
Yeah,
but one of the processes of therapy, as Jake can tell you, is teaching the patient why they do the things that we do. So there's all sorts of things, just fucked up things, maladaptive things that I do, that I have only figured out nearing age 40. Oh, I do this because of that bad thing that happened, and my brain thinks XYZ makes sense when it actually doesn't.
Oh yeah. That is baby. Number of habits I've formed that way is many.
Right. So good therapy, the therapist will go, oh, okay, you're doing that because something bad happened to you. And then you go, oh, okay, well, that bad thing's probably not going to happen to me again, so I can stop doing that. Or alternately, you can be like, well, this thing I'm doing is actually making my life a lot better, so I'm not going to stop doing it. But it does help to know why I'm doing it.
The understanding is key.
Absolutely.
Very key.
So testing the friendship bond is, I think, unconscious in a lot of situations. I certainly do it. If I'm really comfortable with somebody, I don't do the autistic masking anymore for them, because it's too much energy. Instead, I'm just going to be flat with them. I'm going to act like fucking Data from Star Trek.
Oh, I've I haven't been.
Okay, wait, no, I have to cut you off here a little bit, Michelle. I relate to that a lot because, but in a slightly different way, because I want to bring this to Michelle. I feel that exact way when I am coarse with people in a certain sense. If I'm getting mad at you in like a video game, it's actually because I'm comfortable with you. It's because it's like if I don't know you, there's no way I'll be saying the same stuff out loud than if I do know you. Even if it sounds very harsh, because I know I am assessing you as an individual, and I'm thinking you can understand where I'm coming from here. You can take it that I'm just mad about this little thing that happened, and I'm getting it out of my system.
So Jake, from what I understand from what you've said on the podcast, you come from a high conflict background, right?
Oh yeah, for sure. Yeah.
Okay. So you are such a good people person, and you're so good at being kind of the producer and the negotiator role for this podcast, because you're dealing with 3 high conflict confrontational people, and you're very good.
Yeah,
you're very good.
It's a specialty.
And that comes from those are survival mechanisms. You develop to that to survive in that situation.
Oh yeah,
environment.
No. Jake,
you're like a deep sea fish.
Jake is
I spent a lot of time in isolation for sure.
Jake's
just
like
deep in my own brain in the dark.
Jake's like sort of an inverse of my deal, where it's like, so you had like 2 brothers, like, you don't talk it out, you punch each other in the fucking face.
Right. Yeah, I never had that. Yeah, absolutely didn't have that.
So here's like the difference is like, yeah, the conflicts and like lasting things for you could be like bad conversations or this or that. For me, it's like screaming matches, coming to blows, someone threatening to punch someone else or this or that, or
yeah,
physical violence.
I'm much more used to emotional warfare. That is for sure.
This is like, it's not like the straight up abuse, or if it is abuse, it's like mutually assured abuse where we're all feeling in it. But now that we're all older, it's like, now we're all too tired for that shit, and we've all sort of elevated our brains to a different plane.
Yeah, and conversely, I would imagine, like, at least on the outside of me, I will 100% say you've got a tighter relationship with your family than I do with mine. Just straight up. Different types of growing up, right?
And it's terrible because it wasn't necessarily inherently corporal punishment. It's like atomic friction. And then recontextualizing that as you get older, and we saw that was all bad. That was all toxic. And we cannot do that as adults. Everyone in this nuclear family is adults now.
Right.
Beyond that, if we did that now, it would be like an episode of Cops or whatever. But,
well, almost all conflict in sibling relationships is a reflection of the stressors that is being put on the family as a whole, and a failure of the parents. It always comes back to the parents. There's that great scene in Kimmy Schmidt where Tina Fey, who is playing the psychotherapist role, is just drunk off her fucking face. And she's in the back of a cab, and Kimmy's driving, and she says, I'm going to skip you to the end. It's always the parents. It doesn't matter what your problem is, or what you're in therapy for, or how many years you spend in therapy. It's always the parents. And she's right.
I mean, because they're God. They're your conception of God.
Yeah. Well, and it can always, in parents in that specific role, just means like whoever raised you.
Exactly. It just
like, it's your guardian, your parents. Like your biological parents is most of the time, but if you're an adopted person, then it's just the person that raised you most of the time.
Or even an older sibling if they are in that caretaker role.
It's your God, it's your moral compass.
Whoever,
when you feel that absence, that's going to inform
from
your
ages 1 to 10, who told you how the world worked, right? Yeah. Like, just,
whenever somebody is freaking out, and a lot of my friends and loved ones freak out because, of course, I can't be friends with normal people because they don't know what I'm fucking talking about. If they're having some sort of an irrational reaction to something, if they're in a state where this is not going to just throw gasoline on the fire, the thing I ask them is, did something happen to you? Did your mom yell at you in this situation that we are in now? And are you having an emotional flashback to that time?
Right.
And there have been dozens of periods where that just stops somebody in their tracks and they're like, actually, yeah, something did happen. That's weird. I've never thought about it that before, because your brain doesn't tell you that that's what it's about. Your brain just forms the neural connection and then sort of moves you on because that's the best way to survive.
Yeah.
So if you can do it to yourself, that's great. Saves you
Oh,
more
yeah.
time and energy.
Absolutely. I don't do it often, but like I've been doing it in my personal life with like the discrete groups of people I'm in, where I will push back, not out of a sense of, well, I want to see how this conflict has an outcome in a certain specific way, but like I've got friends that are like autistic or autistic adjacent, I want to say, where it's quite clear there is ways in which the socialization does and does not work, where I feel I'm not pathologizing, where it's just like, yo, man, you volunteered this shit out openly to me. I'm going to work off of that axis and push my ankles up and dive in.
Well, that's
just
the thing.
Say that shit. Not
the end of
because
the day-
I want to be authoritative or tell you all these ways you're wrong. It's just like, I want to fucking know how to work within this schema. And you ask a lot of me, so I'm going to ask one fucking small thing of you.
Right.
Somebody has to be that friend.
There is very little, if any, I'll hesitate to say all, or I'll hesitate to say none, but there's very little conflict resolution without communication.
Right.
Absolutely.
It is mechanically part of how you, like, even if it fucking sucks to talk about, you will not make it better by not talking about whatever the problem is.
Because that's how
that's
it
a
lingers.
universal truth I have learned.
That's how
Like,
it lingers. That's how it festers. It becomes gangrelous.
So
Yeah.
whatever whatever route to communication you can find, that's the opening valve on that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
But I mean, I'm gonna like,
Yeah, no.
I'm gonna
that's
call
fine.
time a little bit. We've been in a good conversation that has nothing to do with Groverhaus.
No, you could be sheriff. I was
It's fine.
immediately about to say like, yeah, no,
We've just
that's
been
great,
going for
but
a little
I'm right
while,
and you're all wrong
and-
and you're all faggots.
And this all started
true.
with. I think I'm just gonna make this episode about Michelle's hole now instead. I'm gonna
Michelle,
cut out
posting
all the
hole is
Grovers.
practice.
The Grover hole.
This will be Grover hole episode.
It is praxis, and I think that
I've
it is
learned today.
defensible. It's defensible on those grounds. It is a kind of political praxis.
Yeah, but
I mean, I'll be honest. That's where I ended. I long ago made my peace with Michelle's Twitter antics, and I'm very much one of the people that can just keep scrolling on that kind of stuff.
I swear to God,
But that's like, I also fully recognize that that's because of my own fucked up brain habits.
I will concede. I do it for attention, but it is not necessarily just
We knew it.
post-traumatic
Fucking
stress
knew
or
it.
whatever.
That's all we need to hear.
We got her, folks. We
Fucking
got her.
Or
Call the feds
Ladies
in.
and
quite
gentlemen.
literally,
Call the
but it's
feds in.
because like the bigger thing for me is how do I
Michelle,
learn
Michelle, get on the ground. The SWAT team is on their way.
differentiating attention to this or that. Like I would not have been able to like be a writer and be published if I didn't like fucking learn how to cultivate, understand attention, differentiate.
You know, it's weird.
Make those
Somehow,
distinctions.
I managed to publish a book without ever publishing a photo of my own asshole. But you know, this is diversity of tactics. It's what
Right.
we talk about a lot at the Antifa meetings. So
We cannot all take the same road.
Well, no, that's it. But
Can't
yeah,
follow
no.
you. Don't go where we can't follow, Michelle.
I mean, but yeah, no. It wasn't the first discussion I had, but yeah, no. It bled into other stuff where I was like, I did know that in certain discrete ways it could be a destructive force in my life, but I knew there were real ones where they had left or whatever for this reason or that reason. But then the people that was able to talk through it, where it wasn't just a series of like bargaining things where I'm trying to emotionally blackmail them into my process. That's not where I'm coming from. And it's like I have like a handful of people in the world, and it's like I think the people I've maybe talked to the most about hyperthymesia, for example, are like in the air quotes the circle, and that's like a handful of people, and most of those people are people I've known 15 plus years. And honestly enough, like the people that I was able to have that conversation with weren't in the sort of clouded, I need to maintain these relationships to move publishing media blah 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 associations for it. And that's a conversation I could have with people that I knew forever versus like where they can make genial jokes about it, or they were fine with it, or they were like not fine with it, but they understood. And it's hard to get someone to a point where they do/don't understand. Like, I feel like Eliza is understood, but it's like,
Yeah, I mean, I hate it, but it's not a deal breaker. I don't judge you for it. It says nothing to me about your
I mean, it's even
worthiness as a friend.
Even if there was a judgment, there is everything that led me to that point, and this or that, where you're able to make the differentiation and distinction. Yeah. All right. So you called it. Did you call the ep fully, Jake?
I have an endpoint. We haven't formally finished, but in my mind, there's a couple places I could just fade out, and it would be a good ending anyway.
We can do edits. So
yeah, like I'm happy
fading
to do
out
that
over
in a
one of
podcast.
Michelle's monologues.
Yeah,
I wasn't monologuing that time. That was Eliza legit teasing it out and fucking.
Jake,
Because
can you
we've
do
had this
2
conversation 2 or 3
fake,
times.
Can you fake end
I
the
know it gets
episode
funnier
twice?
every time.
I could maybe fake. I could
you
fake
fade
in the
out,
episode. I
then
could
come
do that.
back in.
That's not a bad idea. So we wanted to close the book on Groverhaus.
Absolutely.
Because we're getting wrapped up here. We did have, so at the end of both of these episodes, and that is why we are even back here in the first place, was we wanted to talk a little bit about that. Groverhaus into Grover getting banned, into a mysterious event happening, into the leftist forum of Something Awful getting shut down pipeline. Is that right?
I don't think Grover ever got banned.
Oh, what
What's
did he
up?
get? What was it?
Did he get demodded?
He got, I believe that he eventually was demodded from Goons and Platoons.
Okay, so I think that might be the event I'm referencing then.
I actually have not checked into his account recently. I don't know if he's like still active on the boards or still posting. Yeah, I'm not really sure what his current status is. So the legacy of Groverhaus is that it was likely the catalyst for what we know now as the dirtbag left, and specifically weird Twitter, and where those two things overlap. Because on November 13th, 2010, laissez-faire subforum poster Maggot Master, who fucking sucks, by the way, let me just say that on the record. There are both pro and anti Maggot Master posters from Something Awful. I think Maggot Master sucks, so I'm just going to put that on record.
I'm pro Henry Crinkle. I'm a pro Henry Crinkle. I like that kind of poster, but as an aside.
Okay, so Maggot Master posts. He posts in laissez-faire in 2010. Subject tag: Goon Project. Let's assassinate Barack Obama, President of the United States.
Oh boy.
It cuts off right after state. And it continues in the body of the message: of America, land of the free, home of the brave.
Oh boy.
First reply: I'll update the wiki.
Oh my god. Holy shit.
Then somebody said a racial slur, which I'll skip. Some other quotes from that thread: Goon projects never pan out.
Damn.
He's spitting. He's cooking.
Frowny face. Golden Lion Tamarin says that's illegal.
Fair enough.
He's just putting himself out there. He said FBI, not me.
Notable user whom I believe is now a mutual of mine on Twitter, although I cannot remember which one of my communist shit poster mutuals they are. User A Goddamn Red replies: Marine One takes off and lands about 100 yards from where I work. What's the range on an RPG?
Oh my god.
Reply from Ambrose Burnside. Somewhere in Langley, Virginia, brows are furrowing. Somewhere in Chile, a phone is ringing. Forums poster Marcus Gravy says, "I'll make the concept art." MacBook Air Gamer says, "For Barack Hussein Obama, November 2nd, 2012 had begun very poorly for him." Which is a reference to, oh God, is it Terrible Secret of Space or something else?
Terrible Secret of Space is, God, I'm trying to think of their Twitter handle, what that Twitter handle would be.
I've gotten to the point with my forums historiography at this point where I can recognize a meme and laugh at it, even if I don't remember what the meme is, which is bad. That's like, it is the level past Darmok and Jalad, whatever that would be. Some sort of
it's like Croat Serb stuff is your like closest fucking, at least mine, not your, the royal you.
It's very funny, and it's yeah, and it's every time someone reminds me that some joke I'm laughing at was a, you know, like a racist meme to start with, I'm like, that can't be right, and then I look it up and it is, and I have to be like, oh,
it usually is, yeah.
Anyway, so the important part is this reply here by a user called Day and Night, who formerly was known as Deaf by Pills.
Like DEF?
Correct. DEAF, F as in Frank, as in the loss of hearing. And this guy literally had taken so many drugs that he became ototoxic and lost his hearing and made that into his entire persona online. I don't know if he was a TCC, which was the drug forum. TCC stands for the Crackhead Clubhouse. I don't know if he was a TCC poster or not, but Day and Night, aka Deaf by Pills, was infamous mostly for having a baby son and then attempting to make the baby son deaf as well by blowing weed smoke into his ears. The baby was fine, apparently. This didn't actually go anywhere, but yeah, he posted about attempting to do this and was, of course, fucking banned, and came back as Day and Night and attempted to become an LF poster, which was not easy to do because you actually have to have some posting chops in order to make it through LF. So this guy that I just gave the backstory to responds, this is still on page 1, says, "Just reported thread to the United States Secret Service. Good luck, Maggot Master."
There it is. There it is.
Yeah, it's FAOI, or excuse me, FOIA.
Correct.
Requests, etc. Would yield that like this shit was actually investigated when Low-Tax like went into it. Like apparently they legit gave him shit for this, but
no,
people
the opposite. The opposite. The FOIA I posted in our Discord last night.
Right.
Says
Christ on a cracker. My bad.
Let's go back. Okay. So this thread,
absolutely, sorry,
a bunch of people were banned. A goddamn Red was banned. Maggot Master was banned. A bunch of people just went down in a blaze of glory because you can't say you're going to assassinate the president.
Absolutely.
Okay, so let's see. Low-Tax posted May 8th, 2011. So, you know, a few months after this thread went up. LF has been closed because I'm sick of the unfunny psycho morons vocal minority in there. The dregs have nothing better to do than mutate LF into an even more pathetic version of 4chan. I'm sick of having the Secret Service show up in my office and issue me federal subpoenas demanding I hand over all records and information on LF posters who decided it would be totally awesome to threaten the US president. I'm I'm sick of reading death threats posted in LF against mods and admins on these forums. And then goes on for several more paragraphs saying that because he has been interrogated by the feds about assassination attempts on standing President Barack Obama from LF, that he is shutting the entire forum down. Okay, so we thought, sure, that seems reasonable. Why wouldn't the Secret Service show up in response to presidential death threats? Fast forward to August 2020. where, let's see, who was it? In the screenshot that I have posted to our Discord, I neglected to save the username of the person who submitted the Freedom of Information Act request, so I apologize. Sent an FOIA request for any records pertaining to Rich Kiyonka. And apparently put it in the official form letter says in response, "Dear requester, this is the final response to your Freedom of Information Act request, originally received by the United States Secret Service on May 12th, 2020, for information pertaining to all records related to the investigation of Something Awful LLC and Richard, quote, Lotax, end quote, Kiyonka, in the matter of supposed threats against the life of former President Barack Obama. In response to your FOIA request, the U.S. Secret Service FOIA office has conducted a reasonable search for all potentially responsive documents. The U.S. Secret Service FOIA office searched all program offices and computer systems that were likely to contain potentially responsive records, and no records were located."
So yeah.
Lotax lied.
Yeah.
He made it up. Unless this went to the wrong government branch, which is
Right.
possible, but unlikely. I think now this was a bombshell when it came out in 2020. I can't believe it was just last year. That we found out that he fucking lied specifically to get LF closed. So closing LF drove out all of the posters who had become radical dirtbag leftists, most of them Maoists specifically, in laissez-faire, and developed their own internal posting style, which became a wider part of weird Twitter.
It's so funny because like that's absolutely when I started getting exposed to some of that stuff, is like 2012, like the year after that. You know what I mean? Like 2012, 2013.
Like 2012, just for a landscape, and I won't be too tangential here, but like everyone's still saying the N-word or whatever, lackadaisically and shit. Like, like even Jack from Twitter is like skirting that fucking line real easily.
Right.
But yeah, going on.
But no, but I'm just saying that's when you start seeing a lot of these pro-left Twitter accounts, especially ones that were rooted in Maoism or a more radical form of leftism than you would see out of like socialists. Like that's, to me, I'm now connecting the dots back in my head of like, I never posted on Something Awful, but I definitely remember the time, a period in which specific friends of mine started veering way politically left, and they did post on Something Awful. You know what I mean? Like, I can now kind of see in hindsight, like the influences.
At some point, somebody posted traffic logs from Something Awful, and laissez-faire was, I think, like the second or third most trafficked part of the entire website.
It was too far from it. I want to cover the conspiracy theory part of that FOIA request.
Okay.
Absolutely. Oh, yeah. Go off, dude.
So if it went to the wrong branch, apparently a FOIA request is just a formal letter asking for information, what you need to be filled out. So it's not like a form to be like, who's going to fill this out? So in theory, they could have said, do you have information on Lotax or Something Awful that the Secret Service has, or about Barack Obama or something? That could have been phrasing that could have had them not fulfill the request by saying Secret Service doesn't give a shit because another agency would have handled it. Because they did say only the Secret Service searched for this information, and then we were like, we got nothing. Second, there are exclusions for a FOIA request, which is to say there are 3 special protections in FOIA, 3 narrow categories. It is the first exclusion is ongoing criminal law enforcement investigations. So if there was something actively in the works at that time, if it was close enough to the event, and then they close it later, they don't have to talk about it.
Yeah, just not to interrupt you, Ruben, but like this came up with stuff like COINTELPRO, so that's good to know. With the FBI, sorry.
Second exclusion is limited to criminal law enforcement agencies and protects the existence of informant records when the informant status has not been officially confirmed. Lotax could have been an informant.
Actually,
yeah,
this is a something I'm going to address on an entirely different podcast because it's not really in our wheelhouse. But yes, there is significant evidence to suspect that the CIA was involved in Something Awful.
I was saying it was the Secret Service that filled out the request because the CIA has information. They didn't want to say that, so they were like, "Oh, we have." we protect the president. That makes more sense. And I'm like, why the fuck would I want Secret Service information? They just stand around in SUVs all day and likely don't keep active records like that because there's no reason to.
Yeah.
I was
They
gonna
don't go
say,
out and handle people. They're very active.
FOIA is not a silver bullet. That's an excellent observation, Ruben.
We could certainly submit our own. That's definitely something that we could do. That is DIY, baby.
That's what's up.
Let's get our own info.
Let's
That
get
might be- that
gribble
might be-
mode, baby.
especially
Gribble
as we
pill.
continue along the something awful pathway. That might be a fun one to follow up on.
And third exclusion
gotta
is limited
focus.
to FBI and protects existence of foreign intelligence or counterintelligence or international terrorism records when the existence of the records is classified. That's non-American soil stuff. Probably not relevant yet.
Wait,
I was gonna say
didn't
he's talking about
Lotex-
black site shit. He's talking about we put some Arab folks in a fucking shipping container in a place.
FOIA won't tell you if we did something outside of the continental US.
Yeah. This shipping container is not fucking American territory. We could do whatever we want to you here.
Weapons are OSP. We got to get Richard Lotax out of Syria.
Fuck me. We're doing it. Lotax isn't dead. Trutherism right now. Fuck me. Oh my god. Hell yeah.
Actually,
God.
we
He's gonna live
renamed
on
him
forever.
We renamed him to Bichard Midtax in the Middle East. He's your new contact
That's what's
in
up.
the agency.
That's what's up.
Oh, I remember the other thing I wanted to say. Load bearing drywall. Load bearing drywall is a Simpsons
bearing drywall.
reference.
Oh, so it's like bringing that into.
Do you remember that's a load bearing poster?
Yeah. I think.
Oh my god.
Yeah. Now I
Okay.
get it.
So
Wait.
there are a couple different superstition isn't quite the way. Is it a spoonerism or
I think that's closer. Yeah.
clone or something? Something that is believed about the
Right.
Groverhaus thread that is not actually true.
Right.
Load bearing drywall is one of them.
Yes.
Wow.
And it has to do with the fact that he mismeasured his foundation, and so a lot of his drywall was like actually floating off the floor and disconnected.
Mhm.
It was also mashed up with the fact that his roof was suspended by hurricane straps.
Yeah.
It was not properly braced. He had actually like put up a webbing strap to maintain the central beam of his roof, which is phenomenally stupid. Even as a non-builder, I can't it's going to stretch out over time. It's a horrible idea. Anyway, so those are a couple of things. And then somebody made a joke about load-bearing poster because the interior was so flimsy, and that became sort of tied into, I believe it was a FIAD quote about load-bearing drywall, and that became sort of back read into the thread, but it never actually happened. And then the other thing that never actually happened is that he did not actually become qualified as an inspector to pass his own house. That was a misreading of one of the earliest posts he made in the thread, where he said he became qualified as an engineer in Virginia.
Right. To get permits, I believe.
Right, which he did do. That did happen, but he was not an inspector. And then there were posts later on, I believe in either FIAD or LF, by a very good, well, I don't know if he was a good poster, but he was a funny poster named Swamp Man. And I always remember Swamp Man because he had an avatar of Ignat's mouse from Crazy Cat, and I'm a Crazy Cat fan. So Swamp Man made a series of posts, and I don't have them right in front of me right now, or I would read from them because they are quite funny, which he pretended to be quoting from the Groverhaus thread and sort of riffing on well, my wife got an Adderall prescription, so now she can, work until 2:00 in the morning kind of thing. But Swamp Man, his parody was so perfect that people believed that Grover had actually written those things. And one of the things that he wrote about in his posts, I believe, was getting qualified as an inspector.
The cert thing, like a lot of people like talked about Grover going through a cert process and like actually getting certified as like sacrosanct, like this is a real ass the fuck
Yeah.
thing.
Exactly.
The post is actually really funny. I have it pulled up, but
Oh, you have it?
yeah. He goes,
That's what's
so
up.
this is Swamp Man, and this is like, it's true. This was quoted Like people were like, whoa, did he actually say this? They thought Swamp Man was just like copied and pasted.
It's totally convincing. Yeah.
Yeah, it's very well. He goes, well, that does it. Fire marshal came down and actually shouted at me because my awful, horrible desire to have outlets actually be conveniently placed. That is, if I want to plug something in, I can do it no matter where in the house. I'm standing, sitting, or working on a ladder. Was immediately endangering the lives of my family. His words. So he ordered us to do some rewiring. I slipped 2,000 milligrams of amino rex into old wifey's breakfast for dinner. So she's out in the secondary TV room maniacally delving into the insulation and tearing out big bundles of wiring. I'm just taking a beer break and updating the thread, which I guess I shouldn't be doing. Since current's still flowing in the wiring she's not supposed to remove. In some rooms, though, we're just gonna stuff in another layer of insulation and put the correct wiring over the top. And then he has a little shush emoji at the end, which in fairness is like, there are literally actual Grover posts where he's like, yeah, I had to punch through the drywall to run this one wire. Oh, well, guess we'll patch it up. It's like very totally on point.
It's so good. There was a lot. There
was
like
an
lot
old
of
wifey's
kind of
breakfast for dinner.
Right, this like precedes a certain style of Twitter post where they straight up will be like,
yeah, absolutely,
dialing in the speech patterns and cadence for desired effect.
Yes, it's an incredible skill in writing, and I've spoken to people, mostly Colin Space Twinks and I are like the two people who talk about this the most on Twitter, I think, because we both have this like sort of tweezers and microscope fascination with posting sort of as a form of writing. And it really reminds me of the sentence structuring that is done by like fine literature writers. You know, people write these posts as if they are Nabokov, you know, and just like tiny choices in word choice, in word order, sentence structure, where to put a paragraph, intentionally putting typos in or leaving them in, capitalizing things or not capitalizing them. And in Grover's case specifically, he had like typos that he would do. It's forensic the way that people construct these things, and laissez-faire was the peak of this kind of writing. They are so fucking good at it, and it's where we get the greatest trolls of all time. The top three would be Toblerone Triangular, Get Fiscal. Get Fiscal is still doing his thing on Twitter, and
he never misses.
He does not miss. And then the third one is who I don't think ever made it outside of Twitter is Stymie. And Stymie is actually present in a lot of these Grover threads, saying stuff like, oh, so this guy actually learns something and learns to build his own house. Let's all shit on him. Stymie's thing he would go into a thread like this and make an unbelievably convincing post from the devil's advocate point of view. And it made people insane. Like he would do this he was on the forums for like 10 years doing the exact same shtick every single time. And it still got people. He got me many times. And I don't know what it is about him, but like the username, all of it was perfect. Cause he would go in and he would stymie the conversation. His avatar was a big titted blue cartoon cat, which was animated so that her tits swung back and forth. And he had the same avatar and did the same thing for a decade, probably. But yeah, top three. So I'm fascinated with that kind of posting, and it really didn't make it out into the wider internet in a large capacity until all of this happened. And it really does all go back to Groverhaus, because it wasn't shut down. Let's say it was not shut down because of Secret Service visits, which is, possible. Then it is very likely that it was shut down because of the anti-Grover, but specifically anti-Groverhaus thread that was started and run in laissez-faire. And that's where most of the big dunks we get on Grover, that's where most of them come from, is that thread. And dunking on Grover became a bannable or a probatable offense in many parts of Something Awful, because the mods just got so sick of it, because he built such a bad house and nobody would stop talking about it.
Yeah, it's not just that. It's like a certain derivative sort of speech pattern and passive voice, and a sort of passive voice for like the pre-Twitter social media dunk could like be formed there, because like, yeah, in order to really get in and snipe at these people because of how they had this predicated way of speech and all of these beliefs or like discrete opinions you would have to comport to or face their ire. So you would almost sort of have to imitate or work off of that. And it's like a weird, distinct sort of linguistic affect you have to get across. Like the get fiscal sort of way of replying or quote tweeting is atypical of like a lib quote tweet or a lib reply, where it's like fire from the hip. It's instead very considered and takes the sensibilities of the reader and like the overarching view into account, which is weirdly literate.
Yeah, I've got one right here. I've got a beautiful get fiscal tweet. And he did the exact same thing on the boards, and he just moved it to Twitter and kept doing the exact same thing. He must be doing this for like 15, 20 years at this point. So here it is. He posted this at 1:30 this morning. I think Orwell would be cool with trans people. The emphasis on the absurdity of constricting binaries seems to point to that. Sadly, J.R.R. Tolkien would have considered them a dangerous type of wizard, though. Like a shape-shifting spellcaster who could never be trusted.
Yeah. What's great is it's fucking hilarious. In the back of my mind, it's like, okay, so it's completely aware of like the current schema of like rolling, where it's like, if you have a vague sense of awareness of Twitter discourse for as long as Twitter's existed, there's been like the sort of right-wing discrete view of people prior to Tolkien becoming anti-trans. No, Rowling becoming anti-trans was before Rowling became anti-trans. What was the big right-wing refrain but read another fucking book? Everyone that has ever said read another fucking book is now basically saying like she is incredibly brave. And it's like super self-aware about that view of sort of untouchable literary figures. And of course he's going to bring up Tolkien. It's nuts.
The replies are full of people who are just taking it completely
taking it at face value.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, he's just playing. He's like, it's like one of my favorite types of humor, which is that if you read it straight, it fools the type of certain person, and if you read it and you're in the know, it's a wholly different thing.
Yeah. I mean, and we love in-group signifiers. You know, it's so satisfying every time to be like, haha, that's a get fiscal tweet. He can't get me. I know the joke.
And then he gets everyone.
Yeah.
I've been gotten by him.
Yep. I wonder if I would love to have any of these famous trolls.
Oh, it'd be awesome.
Speak about it on the pod. But they have a kind of, I hesitate to ask them to break kayfabe though, because it is kind of, if we could find Toblerone Triangular, he might be willing to do it, because he did eventually break kayfabe on his own. But if you've ever heard the term pure strain gold, Toblerone Triangular was in LF from the very beginning when it was the Ron Paul quarantine zone. And the Ron Paul guys were, of course, really into gold, right? Well, the next level up of being into gold was being into, quote, pure strain gold, which was which was gold, but it was elementally superior to regular gold because, if I'm not getting this wrong, which I might be, it was formed during the Big Bang as opposed to later geological processes.
Amazing.
So Toblerone Triangular is amazing, but he did eventually break kayfabe on his own, and I think he became like a normal poster after that. Like he was just like, okay, this project has concluded. So I don't know him personally. We probably know people who do know him who might be willing to.
We'll see.
Yeah. I'd love to get him on. If any of you famous
Yeah.
trolls are listening, hop on.
Absolutely.
We'd
I-
love to
Yeah.
talk to you.
I mean, I know Get Fiscal has his own podcast, so he clearly has some sort of persona he
That's-
presents there. I don't know if it's
It's
the
not a
same.
persona. That's that podcast is specifically about religion.
Okay.
Oh yeah, he's
Uh,
Catholic or something, right?
I know he's Christian, but it's sort of an interfaith slash. It's not kayfabe or this or that. I've listened
see,
to
I
it a
see.
few times. It's called You Can't Win,
Yeah.
and it's specifically about not just interfaith, but like faith as it relates to the world and this or that, where it's like clearly the thing he's like legit passionate about, where you can't
Yeah.
put on airs about.
Right.
Uh,
So yeah,
and
you
then
know,
that's fine. Yeah.
we would always love to have someone like that involved, I would think, as a way to
And
just
bu-
kind
bu-
of
bu- bu- bu-
wrap up and put towards end thoughts.
and-
Like,
Hey,
yeah.
you know, to
Oh,
yeah.
we do have a mailbox. We
Yeah.
do
You
have
have
a
a
mailbox
mailbox.
now. Yeah.
I'm gonna tweet about that as well this weekend or this week.
Fair enough.
I think
folks.
tomorrow before, because the new episode's Wednesday. So tomorrow I'm gonna do a tweet out for the mailbox, and hopefully by
Okay.
the new year we'll have some stuff. Like we'll have enough. We'll just let it pile up if it's.
He's
if
saying
it's
tomorrow,
slow
but
going.
folks, if you're listening to this right now, it's not real time, and you know, you can edit this, that, or other. But
Get fucked.
you get fucked, Ruben.
Yeah.
for a while.
So, if you've got shit to say to us,
Yeah,
um,
absolutely.
say
coming
it
up-
to my face, pussy, and not on the internet. Email it to workinonitpodcast@protonmail.com. We do love the proton mail. We support cryptography and
Hell
and
yeah.
fuck the man, right?
Yeah. Our,
Absolutely.
our Gmail account sucks, by the way. It's full of spam and terribleness. So
See?
Mm,
I
what
just
I'm
use it. I
saying.
just use it for the account registrations. Alrighty. Well,
I
yeah,
wanna-
that's a good. We'll actually that's
want to
interesting
thank.
keep that separate as the Proton Mail account. I like that. As-
Yeah,
yeah.
Want to thank y'all for joining me tonight. Sort of in summation, I do think that it's sort of interesting that we can have small, discrete experiences and sort of views and resentments. This all happened in a different time. If you're listening to this, you're like a Zoomer or something, you're not a millennial, because like we do have a small group of people listening to us right now, but like you don't have a lot of point of reference. This was in a much different time where there wasn't a lot of algorithmic engagement, but also algorithmic management. There were humans behind it, and like it led to human occurrences. It led to human outgrowths. I know people have a lot of things to say about censorship or this or that, but like in a weird sort of way, people being able to be made aware in certain ways could have only happened where there were more humans being able to make these decisions versus humans sort of moving in that certain distinct way. And we need more of that, folks. We as always, encourage actual hands, actual gay little fingers being across the buttons leading to these decisions. And people on a posture that gay little hands are and gay little fingers are pressing the buttons. They're not. They're working towards specific weird outcomes predicated on bad corporatizing decision making. We need more human beings in the decision making of where humanity goes, baby. Even if it's one person fucking up their life or where they live in this profound way. Think of the outgrowth that has led to that, and the sense of humor and cultivated sense of self and sense of humor and affect and speech patterns and ways of thinking, but then litigating and interacting with others. It's all human all the time. And we need more of that. We need humanity to answer inhumanity in these times. And that's all. As always, I'm Michelle Perez. I'm joined by my homie Jake. We're past the buddy era. This is homie era. My homie Ruben and my homie Eliza. This has been Working on It. And you have yourselves a good ass night.